Hello, everybody, and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well, and today we're doing a box office breakdown for this past weekend, which saw Mickey 17 flop. There really is no other way to describe it, though, of course, Tony over at Deadline is always going to try to find a silver lining on a lot of the films. By the way, nice new profile picture. Tony, as he says right here, sad weekend for the lofty-priced original sci-fi fare with Mickey 17 only opening to 19 million, but keep this in mind, right? So trying to keep things positive going on for this and the general sentiment, even though, again, the only other way you can describe what's going on for this movie is that it is a catastrophic failure because the film cost $118 million to make. This is from Bong Joon-ho himself, who mentioned the budget of $118 million. That is before marketing, before you take into account any splits between studios and between the theaters as well. So this movie right now is sitting at about 150 million-ish or so in the red and is not likely going to be recovering that money anytime soon. So yeah, really, really bad situation going on for this movie. Has not had very good word of mouth either. And I imagine, especially since this decided apparently from those who have seen it to go into the direction of politics and trying to have some type of, kind of political message about modern day America in some respects, I think that's going to isolate a huge portion of the audience that might have actually had some interest in it. And apparently the movie is also just not all that great either. And so that, of course, is going to have something to do and to play with here as well. Now, it has to be said, because some people apparently just don't know this about Bong Joon-ho. If you actually look to his filmography and you've watched a lot of his films before, I've actually been a pretty big fan of his for a long time. I actually really enjoyed Snowpiercer for what it was. There were some issues that I had with the film overall, but I thought that Tilda Swinton did a great job, and I think that there was some messaging in there that was actually interesting and intriguing. But then he's also done films like Okja, which is very, very political, very much into that environmentalist, animal rights type story thinking. And so those are the types of movies that he has always been known for making, right? They almost always have some political undertones. Sometimes they're very overt. Sometimes they're a little bit more under the surface. So for instance, with Parasite, it was definitely one where it was more under the surface. It was, again, a very well-made movie. A lot of people actually got to see that one, but it was one that still did have that messaging in there. When it came to films like Okja, it was more on the surface. It seems like Mickey 17 is more of those on-the-surface type political movies, and so it's really not all that surprising to hear this. But anyway, for those that maybe just did not know that about him before, this is not really something that is all that shocking that this was in the movie. It's sad because the film actually looked really good. There was a lot of really good trailers for it. The buildup was good. Apparently Robert Pattinson is fantastic in the movie too. But hey, the numbers are what they are. And right now, this film is set to lose a lot of money. And we'll talk about that in a second. But first, let's go through the rest of these movies on the top 5 of the week domestically. So Captain America: Brave New World still hanging around that number 2 spot, 43% drop, 8.5 million this week, still dropping from 320 screens. So this is a movie that is still not making any ground really up against Quantumania. As of right now, it's still about 11% behind the domestic total of Quantumania at the same point of release. So technically, you could say there's some movement there, but basically it would take another 6 or 7 weeks for it if it continues to move on this trajectory to finally catch up with the domestic total of Quantumania. The main problem, though, is that it's not having the same kind of ground being made up internationally. So whereas this movie is about 11% off of where Quantumania's was at the same point domestically, when we talk about the global total, the film is still 18% off from where that movie was, that movie having reached around $447 million as of this weekend. When that came out back in 2023, this movie only at $370 million. So yeah, this movie's not catching up with Quantumania's global total. That's a fun thing to say. And you're also not going to be seeing anything change with that going forward. You might have an argument that the domestic might be able to catch up. Disney obviously is always very notorious for being able to use their willpower and to use the whatever pushing power they have still on the theater chains themselves to really push their films down people's throats and to force theaters to have various screens, even if there's not a lot of people in those screens. Let's just be honest here. If you have got 10 screens showing the same movie, but no one's going to see them, you're still getting much more exposure. It's kind of like that surface level stuff, right? If you got more surface area in general, more things are going to hit it. Same thing also works with movie theaters too. If you've just got more showings, more availability, people who show up to the theater who just want to see a movie we're more likely going to see the one that has more readily available showtimes than the one that has not. And so that is, again, kind of the way that they have been able to push forward films like Mufasa. We've seen them do this with other films in the past as well. Sometimes when they have got actually decent films, it works out very well for them. A la, a Inside Out 2, for instance, they were able to make quite a bit of profit off of that one. But Brave New World, no one's wanting to see it. No one wants or cares about the movie at all. And so this movie is still going to be a massive catastrophic failure, especially if the upper area of where we think the budget on this movie actually was ends up being the case and ends up being true. Obviously, since they did not film in the United Kingdom, we won't have those same types of tax return numbers that we can rely on for some honesty from Disney. But maybe we live in a new world here in the United States, so maybe we might be able to start to get some Freedom of Information Act, or some, maybe at the very least, people who are stockholders asking for the financials or whatever legally they can do. I would be very intrigued to find out how much they've actually spent on projects like this, because honestly, I don't see how this is not scamming your investors when you are trying to claim in some way, right? And obviously the argument would be, well, we didn't officially state it. It was reported in the trades, but they got that number from somewhere. So I really hope that the truth inevitably comes out about it, because it'd be great to go back to articles written by Tony and so many others, which were like 180 million production budget, even though anyone with a brain who's paid attention at all the last 2 years only, right, let alone the last 5-10 years, how they oftentimes spin the numbers and oftentimes lie about the actual numbers that are being reported. Nevertheless, the film not doing well still. Last Breath from Focus Features dropped only 47%, so a pretty strong hold there when you look at that in comparison to where most films tend to go in their second weekend, especially for a lower budgeted film and a film that didn't have a huge opening weekend to boot. That being said, the film still cost quite enough, right? Over $23 million reported production budget for this movie for it to be anywhere close to breaking even. We can now make some projections. The fact that this film will end up as a box office flop. Number 4 spot went to The Monkey from Neon. This is continuing to add to its profits. So again, kudos to them for justifying the film's existence and paying for the next film in the franchise, which will likely be announced if it hasn't already. And then number 5 movie went actually to Paddington in Peru. And what's interesting about Paddington in Peru is that it is actually seeing quite a significant jump in its box office because of the international totals. Now, of course, unfortunately, my charting has not updated with those numbers yet, but the film has jumped about 30 million or so from the last time that those numbers were reported, and so that is likely mostly coming from those internationals. And so, hey, Paddington Peru still has some life. It's still a ways away from breaking even theatrically, but it is definitely doing a lot better down the stretch and down the road, thanks to some of these later showing international numbers coming in. Dogman got the number 6 spot. Anora, which won Best Picture at the Oscars, which do not matter anymore. The film is essentially pornography, unfortunately. This film also had a huge increase in the number of theaters as well because of its win, and it made $1.8 million. Good job. Okay, good job. That just shows you, honestly, where the Oscars currently are. The fact that this was the Oscar winner for Best Picture, and it only made $1.8 million on $960 per screen. So, yeah, it's been out for a while at this point, but no one cares. No one cares about the film. No one wants to actually go and see the film, and I wouldn't recommend it to anyone either because, again, it literally is pornography. Mufasa's still hanging around. This film, again, so much better down the stretch numbers-wise than it had any right to do. Rule Breakers from Angel Studios, only $1.5 million. That's about half of what was being projected by some people, like Box Office Theory, I think, had it in their 3 million range, so this film coming on the lower end of some of the Angel Studios releases. And then in the Lost Lands from Vertical Entertainment, only $1 million. That's more of an independent type movie, so that's about what you would expect at the box office these days. Looking at the international global numbers, we got Mickey 17 at $53.3 million. Captain America, Brave New World at $370 million. And again, the film has been able to make ground up. Again, starting from the second Monday, it was starting to, in the daily numbers, beat that number of Quantumania, but still $176 million is where it currently stands versus the $198 million that had been made by Quantumania. So still tracking quite a bit behind, whether you look at the percentages or look at the 20 million or so separating them. If you look at it that way, the movie is just not making up enough ground and is likely going to either not reach $400 million worldwide or at the very least not get anywhere close to the total that Quantumania ended up having. Last Breath at $14.8 million. Again, we can project this film to be a flop. The Monkey at $39.7 million, a huge success based especially on that $10 million budget. And then Paddington in Peru, right? $175 million is where the film currently stands. And as you can see, a huge discrepancy from domestic international. These films are always, though, very good. I've yet to see this one specifically. I know I really want to, though, because the other films have been really good. Everything I've heard from those that have seen it have said if you like the other two, you'll probably like this one. It might be the weakest one from the franchise, but that's still coming from a pretty strong franchise to say something like that with. So this film seems to be doing a lot better down the road, and so we'll have some further reflection on this once these numbers update in my chart. Speaking of charts, we love charts here on OMB Reviews, and so let's talk a little bit about where Last Breath is and then where Mickey 17 is likely to end up also. So because we now have the week 2 numbers for Last Breath of 14.8 million as of the recording of this video, I can project the film will make somewhere between 21 and 29 million dollars when everything is said and done. That's based just on where most films tend to perform. The film did have a $23.8 million production budget though, so its break even is probably between 60 and 70 million dollars depending on what break even point you have for the film. And based off of a 2.5 multiplier, the film would still be a 17 to 22 million dollar loser. So we're expecting this film probably to end up losing between 20 and 25 million when everything is said and done. Again, the numbers have not updated yet here on my chart. Box Office Mojo can oftentimes be a little bit slow in reporting these numbers, unfortunately. They're very quick to report the Monday numbers a day or two early for Captain America, Brave New World, but when it comes to the smaller films, not nearly as antsy about that. It's still sitting about almost $30 million in the red, though. That's not likely to change anytime soon. We also don't have the updated numbers in the chart, at least, for Mickey 17, but what we can say is that the film is still about $150 million in the red at this point. The movie's break-evens between $295 and $354. That's right. A 3-time multiplier will put the film's break even at $354 million. So whether the film has a break even of 300 or 350 million, it's not getting anywhere close to that. Remember, on average, most films tend to make about a third of their entire box office globally in their opening weekend. So using some math, right, the multiplier typically on average being 3 times, 3x, that would mean the film would make around $150 million globally based off of this opening of $53.3 million. And again, that is, of course, coming from the numbers reported at thenumbers.com. And so if that number ends up being a little bit higher, you have potentially between 150 and maybe 175, but that is still a far cry from the 300 to 350 million you need to make to break even. So it's not going to happen for this movie. And based off of everything I've heard about it and we've seen about it, it doesn't seem like most people will be rather all that sad. Having heard that. Some of the updates here, we of course have Captain America Brave New World now at $370 million, and so its break-even point is still quite high, and it's still about 250 plus million in the red, not likely to make too much more ground up in that area. Paddington Peru will definitely have cut into that negative number there, so we're looking probably this film being in the minus 50s, minus 60s, so it still has a long way to go, but is definitely better than it was last week, and if it continues to move in that direction, it'll definitely be good news for it. Love Hurts still continues to be a flop according to these numbers. Heart Eyes is a film that, again, could still make money back. It's not looking like, at least at this point, based on the numbers in the chart, which, again, may not have been fully updated yet. Dogman looks like it's on the brink of breaking even. I think this film still has not updated its numbers either. And then you've got a lot of the other films here on this list. Sonic the Hedgehog, still 45 million in profits there, so kudos to them. Mufasa, reportedly 18 million in profits. That's assuming that $200 million production budget is accurate that we first got a long time ago, but still, no one, I think, would have expected this to get upwards of $700 million at this point of release. Again, crazy numbers there. Moana 2, I knew would make over $1 billion. Sure enough, still in that, obviously, that area. And most of these films now that have been out for a long time are not making too much left at the box office. I do have another category here, though, in my chart as a way of kind of trying to help with some other ways of looking at the numbers. So as you can see, these are the multipliers from opening weekend, which means right now The Monkey has made 3 times its opening weekend numbers, which shows you how strong the film is, because that means it's trending, making more than what you typically find from your opening weekend, more than the average that you typically see. A Complete Unknown had made 5 times its opening weekend globally. Sonic made 7 times its, again, a lot of that's because of the delayed international release, but still that number is where it is. And as you can see, the average is about 3.25. So in general, if we kind of, correct that for possible issues like having different domestic, different international release dates, you're still looking around 3 times opening weekend is where most films on average perform. And then if you talk about the based off of the second weekend numbers, which is where my numbers typically come from, as you can see, the range for most films is around 1 to 1.5. Some of the stronger films like Complete Unknown, Sonic end up going to 2.8 to 2.3, but in general about 1.5 times the budget, which is again about where we typically see between 1.5 and 1.7 or so on average. But hey, that's a new column there for people that like charts and like numbers. that's some more stuff and more data to analyze and to utilize. And so let me know your thoughts about this. Have you seen Mickey 17? Is the film any good? Again, based on these numbers here, we can project the film. Going to be a pretty big box office loser. Can't say I'm all that surprised by that. Also, thoughts on Last Breath, The Monkey, Captain America, Brave New World, or Paddington. Any of those films, let me know in the comment section down below. If you like this video, smash that like button and make sure that you smash the Rumble button over on Rumble as well. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Also, check out the website, ombreviews.com, because the Raven Awards were last weekend. Crazy, it's already been a full week since the Ravens at this point. So if you want to see the winners of the Raven Awards, go check out the website. There's also going to be posted on the website soon a ballot for you to start to basically put forward recommendations and nominations for next year's Raven Awards. We try to collect those throughout the year. That way, if you have a movie that you really, really love or a movie you really, really hate, you can get your nomination in right away, and we can create this short list. So that way, eventually, when we collect the actual nomination forms, you'll have a short list of movies and people that you'll be able to choose from. That way, it's easier for people to remember, because sometimes it's hard to remember what we've watched over a given year. And so be on the lookout for that. It's been posted on social media platforms, but obviously we've had some trolls, and so I'm trying to find a better system for it. So if you can find it, don't worry, it will be logged, but I will obviously send y'all the most up-to-date link when I have it available, once I figure out what system is best to keep trolls away. Anyway, you guys are great. Have a wonderful day, a blessed first Sunday of the holy season of Lent, and as always, God bless. And now for a huge special shout out to all of my Chosen of Valhalla members, starting off first with my people on Patreon, Father Luca Illick and Miss Martin Muses. Check out her YouTube channel by the same name, Miss Martin Muses. Also to my Subscribe Star people, Matt317. Check out his Twitch channel by the same name, Matt317. And lastly to my YouTube member, Mr. Roy. Shout out to you, good sir. And if you want your name shouted out at the end of every live stream and video, check out the top link in the video description below, where you get access to that. Also, you get access to a plethora of other things. You get your name listed at the end of every live stream and video, like you saw in those names that came up before this video started. And also access to a giveaways channel that I host over on the Discord server, where I give away 4Ks, Steelbooks, Blu-rays, all kinds of stuff. So check that out if you're interested in that. Also, I have an exclusive podcast that I hold at least once a month, and it's always a good time, and you get extra bonus content with that also. So if any of that sounds interesting, again, check out that top link in the video description below. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and as always, God bless.